I'm Dr. Mary Striegel.
And I'm Dr. Catherine Cooper.
We're sitting at the conference room of the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. We're here to summarize and tie together the information that we provided to you in our previous laboratory videos on paint sampling and analysis. First and foremost, the methods that are used should be based on the research questions that you wish to answer. This means that in any given project, you may use only one of the methods, or you may use multiple depending on the data that you need.
Absolutely. And in our case study at the Cooley House, the main research question was, what were the original paint colors used in the interior of the house? The secondary questions that we were asked to examine were, what are the optical qualities or aesthetics that those paints may have had?
Why did you choose the analytical methods and sampling methods that you did?
I chose a cross-sectioning method for taking the samples from the interior of the Cooley House because that is the most straightforward method for removing a sample from a concrete substrate. It also provided the shape and type of sample that I was able to mount and examine under a microscope to look at that cross-section. The additional benefit of that type of sample removal is that it left part of the original paint sample on the wall that could be used for measurements using a gloss meter or colorimeter.
What is the benefit of examining paint samples under a microscope?
In the situation at the Cooley House, using microscopic analysis and examining the cross-section allowed us to figure out what the original colors were, both using an electronic color picker on the computer and also with comparison to a color fan based on the manufacturer that the conservators wanted us to compare to. And the added benefit of this examination of the cross-section is that we could see the structure of the paint layers and how different the outer exterior layer of the newest paint layer, the off-white latex, is, and how smooth that is compared to the oldest layer, which was quite rough. And that ties in quite well to the gloss meter and colorimetry data that you were able to collect, correct?
That they do. The difference in texture that you mentioned affects the glossiness and the optical properties of the painted surface. It affects the way we visualize that information. The gloss meter is able to quantify the aspect of the painted surface's appearance and show the most recent layer of latex paint is a lot smoother than the original surface.
And the colorimeter readings could also be used going forward in the conservation of this house, correct?
That's right. Colorimeter measurements can be taken at intervals over time, and this allows us to know how the color might be changing, particularly if it's exposed to UV exposure or some other preservation treatment. You also examined some of the chemistry of the paint samples, which is important to know in regards to how the paint pigments will degrade.
So yes, I used Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy to try to identify the components of one of the yellow paints from inside the Cooley House. Yellows were the most common color inside the house, so that's why I focused on that particular color for this type of analysis. The pigment that the yellow sample had in it was a chrome yellow or a lead chromate with a silicate-based extender. This is a good piece of information to know because it both tells us of the toxicity of the original paint and also that the original paint was using an inorganic pigment and extender, which would hopefully have increased the longevity of that color compared to some of the organic alternatives.
So what's next for the Cooley House now that we've handed the reports over to the team working on conserving the building?
I spoke with the folks at the Cooley House recently, and they are currently in the process of doing mock-ups of taking the color recommendations that we made with the modern paints and testing how to apply them in the house. So looking at how best to apply the paint to give it that roughened texture, to press it into the concrete, and then also to check whether or not a glazing compound on the surface would be appropriate in this situation, as that was an option at the time.
Well, that will certainly be quite a different appearance than the current off-white latex paint that's on the walls.
Absolutely, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do.
Thank you all for joining us. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Our contact information is in the instruction packets or can be found on the NCPTT website, which is www.nps.gov/NCPTT. Thank you again.